All right, welcome back. So let's see, where were we? We were on exercise 6. So how are folks doing in terms of getting their integration tests running and then being able to hook a debugger up to them? Well, first of all, do we have new folks who are new to this session who were not in the previous tutorials? Okay, cool. So there should be USB keys on the table there. And if you sort of ask around to the people around you, they can help jumpstart you through. They can put you to the wiki page where we've got the previous exercises. You should be able to move through those. We've got a whole bunch of people in the room who've done them already, and so should be able to give you a hand in moving through them. So, quick show of hands. How many of you are still at lunch mentally? That's what I thought.
Raise their hand if they are.
Okay. So, where do we stand? Like, how many folks have got their integration tests passing right now? Okay, cool, excellent. How many can make them fail? Excellent, because tests that don't fail aren't particularly interesting. And how many folks have done exercise 6 and actually coded a debugger successfully at it? So we still got some folks working on that. So, what I probably will do at this point is, before we move on to exercise 7, where we'll introduce some stuff having to do with the data tree, I've got some slides where I'll talk you through some of the data tree stuff, and some of the rest of you who are still working on getting your integration tests going can keep working on that, and then once we get sort of through this and launch folks in that direction, I'll come around and see how to get folks on stock. Sound good to everybody? Cool. Let's see. Okay. So, the OpenDaylight data store, key concepts. So, Yang data is a tree. In OpenDaylight, we have 2 logical data stores. We have the operational data store and the configurational data store. And this gives you a unified view of the world where you can represent stuff coming from multiple different plugins in OpenDaylight into a single unified tree. On the operational side, you can represent the operational state of the system. So for example, if I have a node that I'm in communication with, a network element, I could represent it operationally. I could put stats on it. I could show the stuff that's actually there. If I have, on the config side, a desire for a particular configuration of the system, that configuration may have existence even if I don't actively have a connection right now to that particular network element. So, you know, all the little arrows. Now, there's one thing, though, that we need to sort of bring conceptually in here, and that's this concept of an instance identifier. So you can think of an instance identifier in Yang as being a pointer to a particular node in the tree. It's how you identify that node in the tree. So let's walk through briefly sort of how data store transactions work in OpenDaylight, reading and writing. So you start out with a data store in some state. You go through and you create a transaction. You do this, in this case we were doing a read-write transaction, by calling on the data broker to give you a new read-write transaction. And then we have what's called an optional. An optional is a handy little kind of object. Basically, if you have something where you're looking to see, hey, do I have that? Is it present? An optional gives you a way to express that because it's a perfectly legitimate object. It's not a null object, so you don't get MPs from them. That can either be present or absent, and then you can get the value of the thing if it's present. So we have an optional for a given node in topology, for example, and we can do a transaction to read from the operational data store a particular instance identifier. So we do that read. So we do a read for N1, it comes into the transaction. We decide that we're gonna do a write. In this case, we're gonna write some node N2 that we've built a topology node from, and we're going to put that into the transaction. And of course, we could also delete something. So I could say in the transaction that I wish to delete node N3. And at this point, I can submit the transaction. And for this, I'll get back a future. We talked previously about futures. They're asynchronous handles so that when I submit it, I get a future right back. but it may or may not be true that my transaction has been applied yet. I can check for that by looking at the future. So I apply the transaction. The new N2 is present, N1, N3 is gone. The transaction's been applied. So here before, we were looking at put for doing writes. That actually literally replaces the node that you're working with. But there's also a concept available called merging in the tree. The way this ends up working is, again, you create a new transaction. In this case, we're showing a write-only transaction. So we've got a transaction. We create our instance identifier, and I'm actually going to walk through how one creates an instance identifier here. So you start by just creating an instance identifier for a particular node. So as it stands right now, this is pointing to the network topology node. And then you can create a child of it. So I'm looking at a particular topology called overlay 1. And then I can, so at this point, I'm pointing, this instance identifier is pointing at overlay 1. So I can then go through and say, I'd like to merge into the config data store this path that I'm pointing to with this instance identifier, and I'm going to build a particular topology for it. Now let's just say this is the topology that I'm dealing with. The topology contains the overlay 1 node. It contains, you know, a list of nodes that only has this new node N4. But I'm merging. So when I do a transaction.submit, it doesn't replace overlay 1. It merges with it. So the new node that lives under it comes in, and because it doesn't already exist, it comes into existence. So, yes, sure. The first parameter to child is the class for the kind of thing that that node is. So in this case, overlay 1 has a type of topology. It's a topology thing. And so that allows you to have strong typing as you're constructing your instance identifiers, because topology is a child of network topology. And so I couldn't put something that wasn't a child of network topology there. The typing system would prevent it, which makes it very easy to not make certain kinds of common mistakes. So if you look at merge versus put, so we'll just walk through it again slowly. If I have a transaction, we construct our instance identifier again. And let's say we take the same set of data that we merged just a moment ago, but instead this time we put it. So last slide we used merge, this time we used put. But it's the same subtree. It's overlay 1 having a child node N4. When I go to submit this transaction, it replaces overlay 1. So the existing N3 goes away because all of what was previously overlay 1 is replaced with all of currently what is overlay 1 in that transaction. Does that make sense to you guys so far? So, yes?
How do we get the information on the ID for an existing node?
So we will definitely get to some of that in exercise 7. But effectively, when you model the data tree, if you have a list of things, so if, for example, there are possibly multiple nodes in a topology, then there will be a key for those nodes, and you will construct the instance identifier by saying child, the type of thing, and the key. You actually see that here in where we constructed, because we could have multiple topologies, we have a topology key for overlay 1. And that tells us specifically which topology we're dealing with. Yes?
You have created the child N4 or N3?
I didn't show that in the slides, no. I mean, they have to clearly be created somewhere, but I sort of presumed a builder because slides. Yes? So a topology key can in principle be a URI, so I don't think in this case you would create it from something other than that. So effectively a string. You could certainly model a key as being something other than that, but in the IETF topology model, it's just a URI. So when you do the child, it's actually, because of the strong typing, you really have to give it a topology key.
I know, but it would have been logical to have an overloaded version.
It would have not been illogical. So the question becomes, how strong do you want your typing system to be? Do you? No, it will always be a topology key, right? And so you couldn't, in this mechanism, you could construct an invalid topology key, but you couldn't mistakenly pass a string that's something entirely different. Yes? I can't quite hear you. Could you speak up? Uh-huh. With regards to leaves? Ah, okay. So in Yang, we call those sort of like those attribute values that are just values. We call those leaves. And so I believe that, because usually merges is impacting lists, I believe you basically end up replacing the object. So if I have an object that just has attributes, it doesn't have lists as children, and I do a merge of it, it just merges in the object. It doesn't merge the leaves together, I don't believe. Does that make sense? Okay, sure. So, I'll come back to data change listeners. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the future gets set. And so if you were doing a get against it, which is blocking, when it gets set, that get would return. Or, yeah. No, but there are some caveats that we'll get into a little bit as we go along about what happens when transactions collide and how that behavior goes. We'll get into that when we start talking about transaction chains. Config and operational, yes. Mhm. You can have puts and merges to both sides. A particular put and a particular merge is only to one logical data store. But you'll see that the put contains the logical data store that it's associated with. So I could have, in the same transaction, a put to a config and to an operational. You get one future for the transaction. So, and actually, you'll come to a place where you end up doing, in the same transaction, in one of the later exercises, a put to operational, a put to configurational.
It's anti-pattern.
Possibly. Anyway, so this is the last of the slides. I'm not going to go into data change listeners just now, because we'll get to those later when we get to another exercise. Sure. I'm sorry, what? Uh-huh. That is a question really for Moise Raja or Tom Pantelis. They're the clustering guys. So they, yeah. Yep, API is the same. Mm-hmm. So
Currently there is no way to specify that. We are exploring that, but this really depends on the use cases. So it's not easy to have the optimistic versus conservative dependency currently. Consistency.
Yep.
So currently it's strong consistency when you are doing the cluster.
What? So please, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick interruption, I apologize. If anybody does anybody in here have a USB key that they got from the wildcard sessions from this morning over in the ballroom E? Does anybody have one of those? If you do, please raise your hand. Can I get your key? Can I get those keys, please? They only have 3 over there right now, I guess. migration of people. And they need to be able to pass out little portables.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I appreciate it, guys.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's sort of a basic intro to the data tree and transactions. And you've seen some of the code. You've seen the pretty pictures moving around about it. So what we're going to do here, because we want to have some way to exercise using data trees within the context of our Hello World application we've been working on, is right now in the Hello World application, we have an RPC. You send it a name, it sends back a greeting. So what we'd like to do is to model in the Yang schema something in the data tree that whenever we get a name and we return a greeting, we will take a note of that's the greeting we returned for that particular name. And so we basically end up modeling that by adding to our hello.yang this fragment, which basically says I've got a container that I'm going to call greeting registry. And in greeting registry, I've got a list of greeting registry entries. The key for this list is the field name. And it has a leaf, which is name of type string, and a leaf greeting, also of type string. And that's just going to be the model that we use for putting this stuff in the data tree. So exercise 7 is to go make this modification to your hello.yang model and then rebuild API. And once you guys have done that, we'll go walk through and talk about the classes that get generated as a result. So go forth and do exercise 7. I'm going to do a quick walk around and see how people are standing with exercise 6 and 5 and see if anybody's stuck while you guys are doing that. Any questions before we go? Ah, cool. I'll wander your way. Cool. Excellent. Yep. Yep. Okay.
So it failed. So now I have to do the debug, right? If I run the test again, it will actually figure
Well, first show me your failure.
show you the failure.
Yeah, show me the yeah, running the test. Let's see the failure, because if you scroll up a little bit, it will tell you very specifically why it failed, because it should be very specific. Okay, so it is not failing for the reason you want it to fail. It's failing because you have another instance of Carafe running. So you need to make sure you kill your existing instance of Carafe. You don't have other Carafes running. The other thing is you only want to run it with the debug flag when you're going to attach a debugger to it. Because if you run it with a debug flag, it will wait until a debugger is attached. And after a certain amount of time, it gives up waiting and just fails your test. You don't want the debug flag because you want to actually see it fail legitimately on its own. So, yeah, and it's clean install. Okay. So it'll run here for a minute, and when it fails, I'll come back around. Yep. Okay, so show me where you're having trouble. Hit cancel. I don't know what's going on there with Eclipse, but hitting cancel doesn't hurt anything. Those little red X's are complaining that it doesn't understand what's going on in your POM files, but it doesn't really need to. So you should be good. Except wait, something's wrong. It's not actually done importing them as Maven projects. So something is wrong. Because it should show up as Maven projects.
Yeah, even if I type something,
Yeah, something is off there. You might try deleting the workspace and trying re-import, and so exit Eclipse, delete the workspace, and try importing again. That might be a good idea. Cool. Have we failed yet? No, we're still running. Oh, yeah, now we failed. So scroll up a little bit. Let's see why you failed. So, see, it's very clear. It's like, hey, you know, did not receive the expected response. It tells you exactly what it was different. Yep, now you can run with the debug flag and connect your debugger and step through and see where it's breaking down, which you know because you broke it. Yep, that's a good place for it. Cool. Yep. Of course.
So this works fine. But what I was doing when it was failing, I was turning to the debug option, like the second step.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure why was it failing. Maybe I was not going to submit the test and it was timing out.
So when you run with the debug flag, it will stop and it will wait for a debugger to connect. It timed out waiting for a debugger to connect, and that's why it failed.
Okay, so I understand now. And it, just out of curiosity, it has somewhere it's like a variable flag or something where it says timeout 180,000. What are those units? Milliseconds?
Probably, yeah.
So probably I just left it 3 minutes there standing because I didn't realize anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. Yes. Right. This basically says in the data tree, hanging off top level, have a container called greeting registry, and have that contain a list of greeting registry entries that have these attributes. Yep. And that's actually what we will do during our integration tests. So we'll start out by having you guys drive it manually because it's just easier, and then you'll do it with integration tests. Cool. You could do that too. You could go either config or operational. They're just two distinct trees.
But in this one, by default, it will be stored in the operational.
No, you actually have to be very specific about which, when you're doing a put or a merge, you have to be specific about which data store you're putting it in.
But right now, it's operational.
Right now, it could go either way.
It depends on the
yeah, implementation. Yep. Cool. Pardon me, Carol.
That might be a problem.
Hey, that's okay. So there's a wiki page that has the exercises you can walk through. Either of your neighbors should be able to point you to it. Do you have a USB key? You will want a USB key. There are some on the table there. Oh, here, we can share. Oh, perfect. Yeah, you have the tutorial wiki page, which has the exercises. And in there, there's a link to the slides that I did show, and some of the slides that Raghu showed first thing this morning. This is not a particularly slide-heavy tutorial. Most of it's exercise-heavy. The what? I honestly don't know. I sort of shudder in fear. This style of tutorial doesn't necessarily translate well to video, so. But we'll see. It should be good. Okay, cool. So how many folks have got exercise 7 to a place where they've got the model edits in, they see that they have new classes, that kind of stuff? So you won't see anything terribly interesting yet. Let's look at the classes, then we'll get an implementation behind it. Then we can start Carafe and look at doing something with it. Okay? So give me just a moment. I'll get mine up here up to date, and then we'll walk through the classes. Okay. So, hello.yang. So I went ahead and did the edits. Now I'm building an API. As soon as it's built successfully, we'll take a look at the classes it generated. Yep. Okay.
Questions about, I think packaging the features that you create
Uh-huh.
and deploying them in a remote instance of the controller. So right now, we kind of, it's using the main repository, right, to install the feature.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you're not with it, if you can just, say, package a car file,
That would work. Yeah.
there's, I couldn't find.
We don't happen to do that much, but it's a thing that works.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out a proper workflow when I'm developing, say, with a bacon box that has OpenDaylight on it.
Ah.
And that's how I want to develop. That's how I want to do each workflow.
Okay.
So keep everything separate in terms of, my main repository is on the Mac, develop, and then I want to just package a car and deploy it.
You could do that. That we'd have to get into, because as I said, we don't do it that often.
Why not?
Because we are looking actually at what we ship, what OpenDaylight ships is a zip file that has all of the available features. Now, none of them are turned on by default, right? So, it's not like you get a whole bunch of crap all at once. You get exactly the crap you asked for. But it's the simplest way to sort of deploy things and avoid all kinds of stuff. And it ends up being a very easily consumable package. The deployment model for OpenDaylight is very straightforward. Download, unzip, run. I don't know quite how to make it simpler than that. So.
You could make it simple. Give me an APM or Mac ports.
Yeah. Anyway, so the API build is finished. So let's go take a look at, we'll take a look at the API project. So I'll right click and do a refresh just to make sure that it's seeing all the classes. And when I look in source main, Yang, Gen, Sao, which is where the generated classes go, I've now got two packages. I've got the one that I had before, which is for the module itself. You can tell by seeing its URN OpenDaylight params XML, NS, Yang, hello, ref, blah, blah, blah. And I've got this other one that carries an extra greeting registry. So let's look and see what's in the original module first that's new. So if you look at the original module, you'll see that we have a new class, greeting registry. And if we drill down into it, it's very similar to what we're used to thinking in terms of, which is it's got, it's an interface, it's a child of hello data, it's augmentable, and it has a get greeting registry entry that returns a list of registry entries. So it's very much like what you would expect given the way we define the container registry entry. Or sorry, the list registry, the container registry containing a list of registry entries. And as we had before with other things, we have a builder here that will build a concrete instance of it. So, and we've got hello data, which is the top level bit here for the module. And then when we actually look down at the next package, which is greeting registry, that's what contains the analogous things for registry entry. So under greeting registry, you have greeting registry entry, which is an interface. And you'll notice that it is showing itself as a child of greeting registry. What this means is that from a typing point of view, you remember the question where it was why do I have these classes that determine the classes? When I go say something is a child of something else, I can know whether that's correct or not based upon whether it implements child of that thing. So you get very strong typing. It's also listed as being an identifiable thing, meaning I can have an instance identifier that points to it. And you can see it has the methods for name and greeting, but it also has this method getKey. And getKey returns the key. In this case, it happens to also be the name, but it returns it as a key object. And then likewise, I have the builder, yes?
So what is the logic of putting the registry entry functions in the greeting registry method, but greeting registry?
So because they live logically under that, you could imagine having two containers, both of which contain something which is a greeting registry entry. So I could have a greeting registry which contains a greeting registry entry. I could have a container foo that contains a greeting registry entry. They're distinct. And so they need to live in a way that allows them to be distinct. That said, don't repeat names. It ends up being really hard on your users. So when you're modeling, don't repeat the names. And then you have the registry entry key object, which comes with sort of standard, copy constructors. You can get the name from it. It has hash codes and equals and those sorts of things. Two string functions, et cetera. So it's pretty straightforward what gets generated here when you construct the data tree in terms of Java classes. It's very analogous to what we saw for RPCs. Are there questions that folks have about the generated Java code from this model? Okay, so if not, what I'd like us to look at is, so we've looked at that mapping of Yang to Java for data tree. So let's move on to exercise 8. Implement RPC record, having the RPC record who it greeted to the greeting registry. Effectively, what we have is this RPC call that comes in. We'd like that RPC call to also write to the data tree, indicating that, hey, Ed Warnicke came in, it sent hello Ed Warnicke out as a greeting, and so we have an operational record of who was greeted. And so to do this, you need to make the data broker available in hello world impl.java, because it's going to talk to the data broker. So you need to add to it a constructor that we can use to pass the data broker in at a field where we can have the data broker. And you need to alter the provider so that it gets the data broker from the session, and so that when it is creating the hello world implementation, it passes it into that constructor. So that's the first piece of this, is making the data broker available. The second piece is that we need to initialize the data tree. Now, this is an interesting thing. When you go to do a put to the data tree, by default, if your parent node that you're being added to doesn't exist, that's an error. Because we can't just willy-nilly presume that because you're writing a node, you want the creation of its entire chain of parents. That can lead to certain unstable results. Now, there's a parameter that you can use that says, hey, if my parent isn't there, create it. But you want to be very cautious with that. What we've seen experientially is that most of the time, when people use that, they wind up finding themselves where they use it in a sloppy way, and they wander into situations where they're recreating nodes they didn't want to recreate. So let me give you an example. If I have a tree of statistics about, say, a particular flow table on a switch, and that switch goes away operationally. It's gone. I mean, I still may have configuration for it, but operationally it's gone. Now, if I delete that switch and I happen to be getting in a write for some stats that are in the process of being processed that were reported before it disappeared, then because of the asynchronous nature of the world, if I were to just recreate the parent, I might recreate operationally that switch that is now gone, which is undesirable. So in that case, you don't want to be writing stats to a device that's no longer there. And so you want to be careful to be explicit about the situation. But this does put you in a position when you're at initial startup where you do need to make sure that your root parents are present. And so that's basically what this function does. It's something you would call from the constructor of hello world impl, and it just goes through and it does a put to the operational data store to create that registry, the greeting registry itself. Does this make sense to you guys? I'm seeing some slightly confused looks out there. Okay. By the way, I'm intentionally, as we're going along, I'm giving you less of here's the whole file to copy and more of the pieces to put in place. So let me know if I got a little miscalibrated there. Yes? And call that method from the constructor. Yes? Sorry, what?
The last line function.
Oh, future Z callback? It's basically attaching a callback to the write.
Right, but it's an error.
so we'll get to that in a second. So in this case, I'm doing something slightly lazy, but not completely lazy. The completely lazy thing that happens from time to time is I write to the data tree and I don't do anything to check to see if the write succeeded or failed. If it succeeded, I got what I asked for. So I usually don't have some other thing that I end up doing from there. So this particular callback was built as simply something to log failures. And when we go further down, you'll see sort of like the creation of that callback. I could very easily have put together a callback that did something on success of the write.
What tells us that that's a log a callback and failure, besides the message?
You'll see when we get down to the definition of this future, which is something that we're going to be writing.
So that logging futures callback knows implicitly that it's an error callback?
Yeah, let me show you. So down, so logging futures callback here. It implements futures callback. And I just pass it as a constructor, a message, and a logger. On failure, I log a warning with the message. Now, just because it's nice to be able to see what's going on success, I log that. It just so happens that I don't have anything terribly interesting to say about success. So I will readily admit that the logging futures callback is a toy, just because I didn't want to encourage you guys to submit transactions and forget about them. Because rarely do people get in trouble because they submitted a transaction and it succeeded. They kind of wanted it to succeed. But I've seen people get themselves in trouble when they submit a transaction and it fails, and they don't even know. That ends up being a problem. But anyway, so you initialize the data tree. And then there are a couple more methods to write to the greeting registry, and a utility method for creating the instance identifier. And then you'll want to have this logging callbacks future to do the logging for you. And that's kind of how you put it together. Effectively, what ends up happening is you write a function that will write to the greeting registry, and that gets called from within your hello world impl. So let's go ahead and start working on, so are there questions about this before we started on exercise 7? Yeah?
I was just wondering, since this is the initialization phase, like you want to put something before it's being used, right? So you want to put it in the data.
I want to make sure there's a node for the greeting registry, even though I don't have anything to put in the list of greetings.
Yeah.
Greeting registry entries. I want to make sure that node is there so that when somebody puts to that node, that I actually have someplace to write. I have a registry to write to.
Yes. So I was just wondering that why does it have to be a callback and not just a synchronous get?
I could do a synchronous get here. That would work. Yeah.
Is there any particular reason to use a callback?
I didn't particularly want to block the RPC returning. I didn't want to block the RPC returning.
We will have a clustering there, for example.
Yep, it could take a while.
It could take a while. It could be a remote call. So you don't want to block the thread.
Yeah, you really don't want to block the RPC waiting for the write unless there's a really good reason. And in this case,
But this is during the initialization phase.
this is true. No, you have a good point. Good habits. Yes? Yep. So two things. One gets back to the point the gentleman just made here, where this is the initialization. So we're actually really putting the registry, because we're just starting up. And then the operational store has to do with the fact that what we're doing in this step is we're recording operationally, I have greeted this person with this greeting. So it's a fact about the world. As opposed to a configuration, which we'll do later, saying, if this person presents themselves, use this greeting when you talk to them. Yeah. But this is during the initialization phase, as was pointed out earlier. Yep. Okay. So go ahead and start working on exercise 7. This is a bit more challenging than some of the previous things. So it'll take a little bit of time. We'll be wandering around to sort of help and answer questions. Please continue to help each other. You guys actually do a phenomenal job of helping each other along, and sort of do it bit by bit. I apologize, I probably should have done the logging callback before the initialization since it's used there. So you may want to get the logging callback going first. And that'll just be a separate class. Any questions before we break to go work on the exercise? Yes? Ah, yes. It's a Guava class, yes. Yeah. Yeah, and just to expand on that for folks who don't know, a checked future just has special mechanisms to make it easier to pass exceptions back to the person who called it in a clean way.
The listenable feature already?
I have not.
So, also a listenable feature, because that's extension of the listenable.
I know.
So also the check feature is extended from the listenable feature, which actually allows you to register the callback.
Yes. So there was a question earlier where someone was saying when we were talking about asynchronous stuff, and I used the example of a while loop looping over and is done. A vanilla flavored feature doesn't have a callback, which is why checked and listenable features are nice, because you can register callbacks with them. So, all right, cool. So let's start it on exercise 7. And we'll be wandering around seeing where folks need help. If you're currently catching up from some of the previous exercises, also feel free to ask for help, either from myself, Raghu, or from the other people who are around you who've already moved through some of those exercises. Cool. Yes. Future task. So I think, let me go take a look at the instructions. Can you bring up the instructions? Where are you seeing the future task? It's a logging callback future, I think, in both places. I don't know. What's actually funny about it is I think I started out with future tasks, when I first did it, but I don't think those are still listed there. That's why I asked you to go check the instructions. Is it was possible that I had mistakenly left them in somewhere? Okay, that's fine. It happens all the time. Cool. Other questions? Yep. Uh-huh. That's fine. We have lots of southbound protocols. Absolutely. Absolutely. NetConf or? Yeah. Well, it depends on what models your device exposes. Right. So. Yeah. Or if you've got Yang supporting your device, correct me if I'm wrong, you just mount it. Yeah. No. I understand. Oh yeah. You still have to have something that translates it. Yeah. You would still have something that translates between them. Yeah, in fact, we've got something, I think the Cable Labs guys for some of the packet cable stuff, we're doing something like this because it turns out COPS and packet cable is kind of very flow-like. It's just they're really obsessed with QoS. And so they were using the same high-level model that OpenFlow was using, which is kind of generic. It's less generic than we wanted it. It's less than we wanted it to be, but we tried. Anyway, and they're mapping it down onto COPS as a protocol. So yes, you can take a high-level model and map it onto your plugin, whether that's whether your plugin is talking like REST or CLI, or if it's mounting a proprietary Yang model from your device to a netconf. Yeah. So the thing is, you can mount the proprietary model with netconf. That's easy, right? You don't even have to really do a southbound model. Then all you have to do is the model-to-model translation, where basically when something in the more generic northbound model changes, you make the corresponding change to your device using the models there.
That translation and logic would be implemented something like this.
Yeah, we're moving in that, you would be moving in that direction. We'll see in a little bit data change listeners, which is the next piece you'd want to do of that. So that when something gets written to the high level model, you have something listening for that change, and we'll see that shortly. I don't remember which exercise it is, but it's coming down the pike where we'll look at data change listeners.
So I can also, because supports notifications,
Mhm.
pushing information to that.
Yep. You can subscribe to those notifications as well, I believe. Yep. See, I keep looking at Tony because he actually wrote most of that code. Okay, Morosh fixed it. Yep. Mhm. Way to dock. Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Yes. It's a little bit further down. I apologize. I got it in the wrong order. I should probably reorder that section. Right. The imports in those as well. You need to create. Yeah. You need to create the class. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Which one is the proper way to do it? Because in some projects I see the get solve service, and in some projects it's injected using the configuration subsystem.
Oh. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. So injecting via the config subsystem, you have a lot more granular control. You can actually control a lot better how you respond to things like rewiring events. And sometimes that's crucial for some applications. For other applications, it isn't. The reason I use the injection of a broker in the get sal services is it is a way easier starting place. And my general attitude is that it's important that you be able to solve the hard problems, but I don't need to make you solve them before anything works. Because then you just never get anywhere. I mean, we could easily spend all day doing the most sophisticated approach to the hardest sets of problems that we could address with this technology, and you would have not even the hello RPC going for most people, right? So, yeah, and this is usually a good enough way to get started, and then as you discover that there's more stuff you need to do, you can work with that. And I've done that in a couple of projects where it's like you sort of get to a place, it's like, yeah, this got us working, but we have this much harder problem, and we have to bring the bigger guns to bear.
Because I actually started with this MD
Uh-huh.
startup archetype.
Ah.
And then later, and I was just checking some other code. Hey, this is
Well, the thing is, I did this towards the beginning of the helium cycle because we had a lot of new projects coming in, and they needed some way to get going, and it was just so hard to get going with stuff that they didn't care about yet. And in some cases, they were never going to care about. So like one of the things at the very end, if we have time, is I'll sort of go through a little bit of some of the magic that happened in here. And so you can sort of see, oh, okay, hey, this is what went into making this all happen. So you're welcome. Because the magic is interesting. I find the magic interesting, but a lot of people just want to get their shit done. Yeah, there's a lot of magic in some of those places. So much magic. Cool. That's okay. Yes. I'm sort of progressively like saying less as we go along intentionally. So, yes.
So I want to understand this better. Right into this data store.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it is all in-memory data store, right?
So the config. So right now it's being backed by the cluster. The cluster data store is by default backing the system.
But if it is a single node, then it is still
So the config data tree is currently by default set up to persist, and the operational data tree is currently by default set up to not persist. Those are configurable, but that's the default behavior.
Oh, if you configure it, it will write to a file.
Yeah. It writes out to it persists that information, and when you bring it back up, the config data store should come back up.
Versus into what database?
It's just to files,
Oh, just a raw file.
just files. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So.
There is no plan in Beryllium to go towards any object graph or anything like.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, not that I'm aware of, but that would be a question for the clustering guys.
Oh, I see.
So.
No, even for single
No, because essentially the persistence kind of, I believe, and again, we need to check, I need to not get too ahead of myself because I didn't write much of this code, or any of this code. I believe that it's sort of the slurp model of persistence, which is when you write it journals, occasionally it produces snapshots. When you come down and go down and come back up, it slurps everything in. So it's basically the journal cost and the startup cost. So it's not an ongoing cost of the same sort that you would usually have with an RDMS, with a database of various sorts. So, yep. Yep. Pardon me. Yes. Yep, you need to import it. Data broker. Yeah, as I said, as we go through the exercises, I'm kind of being less specific, you know, about some of these things like, you know, when you copy the snippet in, you'll need to import it. Now, I don't remember, I think I actually still included the list of imports here, if you need to figure out how to disambiguate between them at the end of the section, so. Yeah. Now, if you hover, have you tried just doing cleanup imports? So you can either right-click anywhere, there we go, and go to source. Higher, there we go, just above refactor. And there is a organized imports. So it's a little further up. There we go. And what that will, and what that will do is it will go through and it will try and figure out, so for example, data broker, it has some options. The top one is the correct one. But that's why I gave you the list of imports, because I knew that these things are happening. And that will resolve that particular error. There's also a hotkey combination, Control-Shift-O. It's one of those things that's so convenient to do, it's worth learning the hotkeys. Cool. All right. So it looks like there's some errors further down that it's complaining about. So you see the red markers here along the edge?
Yes.
If you click on one of them, it'll take you to where it's complaining. Okay. Yeah, logging futures callback, you're going to have to create that class. And there, it's in the wrong place in the instructions. It's further down than it should be, but it is there. Let me see. Logging futures callback, it's there.
It's there, but this guy's still complaining. Maybe.
Did you import it?
No.
You may have to import it. I think you have to import it.
Okay. Because usually I just do here. It doesn't have this option. Okay.
Wait, or see, logging futures
Also
callback.
can't find this guy. This guy not as you.
Ah, okay. Go to yeah, data import. Then you should be able to import that.
Yeah. Okay, that one goes away. But this one.
So toInstance identifier is a method you probably wanted to copy in from.
Yeah, that I did.
Okay, yeah.
It's down below here.
Yep. Greeting registry key.
Should have an import option. Okay, it's out.
There we go.
How about this guy? This guy doesn't have import. I have to do it manually.
I'm trying to figure out what is going on that is not seeing that. Try saving. Huh.
Hey, this guy sees it. Oh, must be a typo.
Yeah, it looks like a typo. And it could be my typo, quite honestly. But no, there's a typo. It should be a capital B up there. Yes. You have to create it. So, yeah, so in the same package. And if you scroll further down, I should have put it further up in the instructions. Apologies, but there are instructions to creating it. Other questions, guys, or? Perfectly. No worries, it's all good.
Is it reasonable to run? I have been building and running natively.
So you can, but you'll need to unzip the M2 file. And the other thing is, don't listen to the thing about telling you to check out of core tutorials. I don't know who wrote that there, and I need to go to remove it. Ah. Yeah, no, you don't want to check out the version from, you want to build from the archetype. But the M2.zip.
Would it be better off just using the VMs?
They're the thing that was actually tested. The M2.zip was like me going, this should help people who want to use their own development environment. So, No, I tried. Cool. Hey. Absolutely. What were you doing to get against? Where did you get the object from? Uh-huh. Oh, you didn't know about a transaction? So what were you calling the put against? Hmm. So did okay. That's strange. Okay. Do you have an example of the code you could show me? Awesome. Okay, so the data change, here's the thing. When you get it on data change notification, and we haven't gotten to data changes yet, which may be some of the confusion. So what happens is, let's say that I come with a transaction, and I submit the transaction. And you'll see this in the slides when we get the data changes. Then when you receive the data change, what you receive is the information about what was put in that transaction. You know, the information that came there. So the data change is just looking at what happened. So you're getting just a collection of normal maps telling you what happened with that particular data change that came there. Unless you actually want to write something back to the data store. Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you want to write something back to the data store, because here's the thing, these are coming back as maps. So. Yeah, you're totally reasonable. Yep. And you take whatever action you're going to take. But if the action you wanted to take was to write something else to the data store, then you would need transactions to write something else into the data store. Yeah, if you're not writing to the data store, you don't have to use transactions. You're just listening for changes to the data store as far as I can see here. So you're doing, you looks like you're doing the right thing. So. No, these are reporting that something was written to the data store. So the data change is basically saying, someone wrote this to the data store, let me tell you about it. Make sense? Yep. So what happens is you do your RESTconf call. The RESTconf module actually does a transaction. And then you get told about that transaction. That's an implementation detail about how it gets stored. It could be anything. It's just a logical tree. So, cool. Yep.
Can I just do the Maven rebuild in Impl, or do I have to do the whole project?
You can just do it in Impl. Well, Impl and Carafe, because we're going to go to test it manually. So when you rebuild, well, API, Impl, and Carafe. You already rebuilt API. So when you do the Impl changes, you can just rebuild an Impl. And then when you decide you want a Carafe distro that incorporates those changes, you rebuild Carafe. Make sense?
Do we have to clean
Yeah, clean install. Always do clean install.
always clean install?
Yeah, and use NSU. So NSU is something we're using. So very specifically now we're using NSU because normally Maven is very chatty across the network, which is fine as you sit in your living room or your corporate office. But with 150 of your closest friends in a hotel Wi-Fi, it's a little stressful. So what NSU is basically saying is no snapshot update, which means don't go looking to see if these artifacts have been updated. So. Oh, don't be too chatty. So you need to be cautious about that, because so usually what I will say is, I'm a fail early, fail often kind of guy, right? So I've seen two sets of things happen. One is if you're building two different projects locally, so you build project A and project B consumes project A, you have to use NSU in project B so your changes in project A don't get stopped. That's natural. What I've seen people do that occasionally gets them in trouble is they will use NSU for months. And then they will finally discover that nothing works, that everything is hideously broken because the other things they depend on have kept moving. Whereas the rest of the world that just wasn't building with NSU in the normal course of affairs, I mean, we're in a special circumstance here. It's like, yeah, they had 5 breakages over 2 months instead of 1, oh my God, nothing works. So. So this one's actually using, to use lithium? Yes. You could do it a couple ways. One is, if you look in the POM files that you have, they have properties that are setting things like the MDSal version, the Yang tools version, et cetera, that you're using. You could always step those back to the lithium versions. And there was a, there was a lithium version of the archetype as well. It just doesn't have a lot of the nice things about integration tests and Yang UI and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So like if you were to use version 1.0.0 of the archetype, that would be pulling against the lithium stuff. So, yep. What can I do for you? What? Oh, mounting, probably you'd be better off asking Tony. I don't actually work with that directly. I've never actually used mounts. I'm aware of them, but I've not used them. So, cool. Yep. Yeah, I'm a soup to nuts kind of guy, right? I don't have any idea where anybody is. Oh, Control-Shift-O. Organize imports. It means organize imports. If you right-click and you go down to the source menu, if you right-click on an editor and you go down to the source menu, it shows you organize imports, and it'll show you the key combination for it. And the magical thing about that is it goes through and it says, okay, do you have extra imports that you're not using? Let's get rid of those. Are there things that you don't have imports for that you should? If I can automatically figure out how to find those imports, I'll put them in for you. If I got more than one bogey, I will ask you which one you want. And so it's a really, rather than going through one by one with the markers when you don't have classes, it just usually gets most of them all in one fell swoop. It's really handy. Well, I will give you one work safety tip with regard to it, which is that I have occasionally commented out a chunk of code, and then a bunch of imports disappear because they're not being used when you use organized imports. So, yeah. So, cool. Okay, how are folks doing? So, I'm going to ask a totally unreasonable question. How many folks actually have done the exercise 7 in terms of making the code changes in the build? I'll be impressed. I am impressed. Because there's a fair bit there. Cool. So we'll give a few more minutes for folks to catch up, and then I'll talk you guys through how to use Yang UI to actually test it manually. That's fine. We can fix that. So, yep. So go to the package that contains hello provider and hello word impl. So that's the project. So go down to the package. Org OpenDaylight hello impl. That's the package. Right click, new class. And then give it a name. It has all kinds of fancy options that can be, deeply gratifying on occasion, but not strictly necessary here. Yep, finish. Now you've got this class. It doesn't have much interesting in it, but you've got space to put the stuff.
Actually, I need to leave early, but
Sure.
by any chance, a USB stick for these sessions over here, which I can carry?
In the box.
I'm sorry?
USB stick in the box.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Yes.
operational and the configuring. So these are
You're way ahead. Awesome. Cool.
So these are the API I need to call, right?
Yeah. So if you keep drilling down a little bit more and you scroll down, you'll see a place where you can actually, you can actually add things there. Now the thing is, though, keep in mind that we're not doing it configurationally right now.
Okay.
So what you want to do is call your RPC and then go to the operational side. And so if you go up to operational, so you're in config. If you go up to greeting, registry, and operational, you can actually call get.
Yeah, I saw the get.
Yeah. So basically, call your RPC and then do the send for the get. Scroll down because the below the fold problem here is bad. Interesting.
Wait a second. Where is it? Where the UI is? Operational greeting.
Yeah.
Is that?
No, that guy is going to ask you to look for a specific one. This will give you the whole list.
We just saw it, right?
Yeah. So.
There's a path or something.
Oh, it's empty. That's why you're not seeing anything. So call your operation under operations, like we did before. So operations.
Oh, operations.
Yep. And expand that down. Yep. Hello world. And then you call it the way you did it before. Cool. Now go up to the operational store and try doing that get again. You have to go down to the actual greeting registry. Yep. And do the get.
It doesn't have anything.
Hit send. There we go.
Oh.
And congratulations, there you are.
Oh, it's in the data.
It's in the data store. Yep.
And the question: how config entry appeared? Because we specified in the code that we using logical tree operational. Why configuration?
Because the model's present. No, you haven't written anything to it, but the model is available. Yeah, so the schema exists, but there's no data there.
But I think if you specify explicitly that we are using just operational, it will be stored in operational.
For the data that you store, but the schema is still there.
So schema installation automatically in both places?
Yeah, the schema is available in both places.
What is the reason for this?
That's a good question.
We specify explicitly in the
So
code
you can specify in model config true or false, but I haven't done as much of that.
It is in Young model we specify, yeah?
You can specify config true or false. I just haven't done as much with it to see what Tony might know what the restrictions are. Tony is not here. He was asking about config true and whether or not schema would show up. Here, I'll get out of the way. Oh, here, you go that way. I'll go this way. Yes. Interesting. So there are a couple interesting things happening here. So first of all, the futures is showing as deprecated. So let's take a look at which futures you imported. Yeah, that's not the futures you're looking for. You're looking for the Guava future. So let's try re-importing it. Ah, there we go. Cool. You may also need to save. Some things just don't. There we go. Victory. You're welcome. Okay, how many folks have got their implementation going and are ready to do some manual testing with YangYui? Okay, so I'm going to actually do my implementation really quick, and then I'll show you guys YangYui. Okay, so basically, I go down to Hello Impl, and I go to the package of org OpenDaylight Hello Impl. I right-click, and I create a new class, which I will call logging futures callback. Okay, so I've created a logging futures callback. Then going back to the instructions, I need to create the constructor in hello world impl. And I've got to import data broker. I believe so. Let me take a look. Oh, it is. Okay, cool. I know. That's the admonition. Try not to repeat names. I only really warn against the things I've screwed up myself. Other than that, you get to make your own errors. So I go ahead and put that in. Hello provider isn't happy then. So I've got to go get a data broker. And again with the importing. Okay. And then initialize the registry. So create the initialized data tree. Oh, not on the provider. Okay, so I got that all in place. I'll go ahead and build impl.
Could you show us the line of code that you put in to actually call the right registry?
Absolutely. No worries. So, actually, I failed to put that in, now that you mention it. So just before we return, write to registry. Input, output. Yep, so just before the return in the hello world method. And now I have to rebuild. Yes, from the constructor. I'll show you. Yep. So if you look here on the constructor, I've got initialized data tree here. Okay, so Imple's been built successfully. So I go to Carafe, maven-nsu, clean install. It'll take Carafe a minute to build. It's got to pull everything together. Yes? You can run a build in the top level hello, that works fine. It just runs through everything. The reason I did Imple in Carafe is I wanted to just rebuild Imple, because that's what I changed. And then I wanted to make sure those changes were reflected in my Carafe distribution. You got a question?
Where this creating registry would be defined because it's missing in Java.
Did you rebuild the API when you added the model? Did you an extra?
I'm doing the whole build from the start. When I build from complete.
No, okay. So did you change the model to have a grading registry in the model?
Yes,
Let me see.
I did all this, but it doesn't run before.
Well, so show me your hello.yang.
Hello.yang.
Yes, that one. Okay, so we got container grading registry. So that looks modulo of the indentation. That looks right.
Yeah.
Content's right. Indentation's a little ugly, but okay. Do you have an IDE that we can go look at it in, or?
No, the ID is not working. It's okay then.
Okay. Yeah, because it's one of those things where I think basically what it would be doing is somehow it's not finding that class. So maybe the import's wrong. Yeah. There could be a typo in the import.
I see it has the type. It has there are two.
Is the right package.
Registry type is there, but.
I have no idea how it responds to the. Yeah. So the thing is, the registry type will have the registry entries, but it will not have the registry itself. So you're missing an import. So you need to actually have an import against, without the greeting.registry, the greeting registry object. Yeah. Yep. Just after just after the version number.
Yeah, change this to star here.
Okay.
After that.
It works. Ugly, but it works. Yep.
Illegal to have container outside the module. Somebody had it outside the module.
I don't think it's legal.
But somehow nothing complained. I mean, of course.
We should file a bug.
But everything was.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, just pasted it at the end. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go up here and start walking folks through manual testing. Presuming I don't completely derail myself. I'm sorry, what? On the table there. Cool. All right, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and run Carafe. And as soon as that comes up, I will go back to the Yang UI, and we will use that to do some manual testing and see this working, so you can see how to do manual testing to see this working. have to give it a second to actually come up. Okay. All right, guys, so I've got the Yang UI coming up now. If I go into the hello model, you'll see that in addition to the operations that I had before, I also have operational and configurational data tree stuff. If I go look at operations, I can go ahead and run my hello world operation again, just like I did before. So I can say, you know, name Ed Warnicke. Comes back and says, hello, Ed. Now then if I go look at the operational data store, and I look at the greeting registry, I can send a get, and it comes back and it will show that in the operational data store, I have Ed Warnicke, and the name is Ed Warnicke, which is the key, and I've got the greeting which was sent, which is hello, Ed Warnicke. I could come back and do it again with John Smith. And send that, and then go back to the operational data store, do the get against the greeting registry, and I will see that I've got John Smith and I've got Ed Warnicke. Does that make sense to folks as to how to do the manual testing? Which I think is exercise 9. Yes, exercise 9, manual testing greeting registry. So are there people still working through 8, still trying to get the code in, get built, that kind of stuff? Okay. How many folks have gotten through exercise 8 where you've made the changes for the greeting registry, you've built it, and you reasonably presume that it will actually work when you test it manually? Cool. Excellent. So I'll give you guys a little bit of time to catch up with 8 and to do the manual testing with 9, and then we'll start taking a look at integration testing the greeting registry. The what? Okay. Under operational, greeting registry. So click greeting registry, not a particular entry. And then click send to get, because you'll get the whole greeting registry. If there was a particular one you wanted to get, you could drill down further and look at that particular one. And so if you scroll down, you'll see. Yep. Yeah, the scrolling down bit, it needs work. But so, yeah, you appear to be doing it right. Congratulations.
I sent a couple, but I only see one of them.
So, are those the 2 you sent?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep. And you can just click whichever one you want. Yep. Awesome. So you're working too. You guys are doing great. So anybody need help with exercise 8 or exercise 9? Everybody seems to be getting it pretty well. Cool. So how many folks have exercise 10? How many have been able to manually test and verify? Okay, we'll let folks keep going a little bit more to catch up. How many folks are actually really quite behind and need a hand? Okay. I have no idea. I've never actually tried to do a huge number of them in the UI. No matter what you do with the algorithm, someone will do something more. Yes. But I don't know quite what it does in terms of scale up there. Okay. Yep.
I'm just trying to understand the difference
Sure.
between the operational directory and the configuration.
Totally. So the reason we do it that way is the operational data tree represents truth about the world. The configurational data tree represents aspirations about the world. So if you've got a registry of greetings for, greetings that you have given to particular people, that's operational data. If you want a particular greeting to be used with a particular person, and that's the thing we'll do after this, that's more configurational data. Right? So if I want people to say hola when you come in, that's configuration. When you actually do finally come in and that greeting is sent to you, that's operational data. We actually know that occurred. It's a real fact about the world.
Okay. And my understanding is you can't, from northbound, you can't write to the operational, is that correct?
You're correct. From the REST conf, you can only write to the configurational.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why now we're writing to the operational directory. I didn't understand. Maybe
Yeah.
coming from southbound only, like.
I mean, in southbound, there's actually sometimes you do. Like, for example, if I am something that talks to devices and I discover a new device, that's an operational fact about the world.
Yeah.
If the device goes away, I delete it because it's operationally not there. Even though I may still have a bunch of configuration for it, because man, if I see that again, I know I need to do whatever synchronization of the state of that device to the state of the configuration that I've got the capacity to do.
And persistence. So when you reboot the controller.
So by default, the config store is persistent and the operational store is not.
Okay.
That's configurable. So
Yeah.
it seems like a sensible default.
How's it actually persisted?
So I'm not the guy who wrote that code, but what it looks like from what I can see is that you have, essentially, you have a journaling behavior for the persistence. Occasionally it computes a snapshot across it. And then when you restart, it slurps it all back into memory.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. Yep. Okay. All right, guys. So how many folks have been able to successfully manually test their greeting registry? Still building? Okay. We'll give some folks a little more time because it is a bigger chunk of work than what we've done before. Yes. You need a hint, George? Always happy. Always happy to help George.
So he first, sends a hello, with a name, and then when we click on the greeting registry send, it didn't show a list of items. But then I noticed there was some text in a
Yes.
color that was almost identical to the background, and I had to move it.
It's less helpful. So go ahead and bring that back up. Let's do this. Let's show preview. So the show preview button so that we can see the URL that's sitting. Just copy that URL. And we're going to go to Postman real quick. So let's bring up a new window and go to Postman. Should be under apps. That can work too. Huh. Okay. So it's possible. Looking at this, go initialize the. I suspect that your initialized data tree is either not present or it's not being called from your constructor and hello world impl. Don't worry, I did that the first time too.
Initialize DB tree, initialize data tree.
Yeah. So go ahead. What it's basically saying is you have no greeting registry there for me to read. I can't even tell you that it's empty because it's just not there. No, I'm mad respect for doing it without an ID. I can't imagine doing it without an ID. I generally am of the opinion that non-tab completing shells and forcing people to edit Java without an ID are both human rights violations. Oh, you laugh. Amnesty International is coming for us any moment now. Okay, how many folks have been able to manually test their registry? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the integration test then. That's exercise 10. So for exercise 10, we're going to do the testing of the integration, the greeting registry for integration testing. It's pretty straightforward. You have a method you need to add to hello IT to validate greeting registry that takes a name. You go through and you construct the instance identifier. You get a data broker, open a read-only transaction, do your read, unpack it, and go look and see whether or not you actually have an entry in the data registry for that. So it's fairly straightforward. So you need to do that, and then you need to add an invocation of it to the end of the hello IT test RPC test. So basically what ends up happening is after you've checked to make sure you got the correct response from the RPC, then you check to see if you've got the right entry in the validate greeting registry. Make sense? And then, of course, once you have the IT test working, break it. Yes? What is what? Oh, the read failed exception? If anything goes wrong in the process of trying to read the, what is it, what? Oh, in other words, where's the import coming from? I don't recall. I would have to go look. It probably will just come up if you organize imports. Doesn't? Because it is definitely thrown by check. Trying to think. I will have to see what I can remember about that. Read fail exception. It's in the signature of the return checked future. So the checked future returns an optional of greeting entry, and it possibly throws a real read failed exception. So that's where it's coming from. Anyone need a hand? Yeah, how can I help you? Yep, you're welcome. You're always welcome to jog ahead if you'd like.
Because when I tested in the UI, I did not get the desired output over here.
Okay, show me what you're saying.
Okay, so when I do a put request, see, show you request successfully. Is that what I'm supposed to see? What am I supposed to see?
Let's see. So okay. You want to first go to the operations. Okay. Go to Hello World, and send input to Hello World like you did before originally. Good. And then send. It says Hello Charles. Now go back up to the operational store. Greeting registry. And you actually want to go to the whole greeting registry. I mean, you could look up specifically Charles if you wanted. That works. But you might as well just dump the whole greeting registry and see.
So
scroll up. So you can either get the greeting registry, which is what you want to do, in which case it'll get the whole list of all of them. You can scroll down and take a look.
Oh, there you go.
And there it is. So it's working.
Okay.
Congratulations. Now integration testing. It just keeps going. Yes?
So if I run the IT test, I just go to the IT folder and do the, or have to go back to the top level folder, rerun everything. I mean, like
As long as you haven't changed anything but the IT folder, you don't have to rebuild everything. You just have to rebuild IT.
just to rebuild IT. Just to
Yep.
see that
So
one.
if that's the only thing you change, then you just have to rebuild IT. Yeah, so, since your manual testing working, I didn't think you changed anything since then.
Also the parameter, the name is the one that's hard coded here.
Yeah, I was using that parameter, yes. Because it's the same one that I used to pass in the thing. When you go to break it, of course, passing something that's not that name parameter would be a good way to break it,
Yeah, totally.
to see it fail.
Yeah, okay. So I can just create a string here and pass it.
That's the way I did it when I broke it. We don't, but my recollection is that it doesn't have any. I don't think it has any new ambiguous bits. So instances, no. There are things that may not find, but they're not ambiguous. So you've imported them elsewhere. Yeah.
When do you use config? When and why would you use config?
So we're getting to that later in exercise, I think, 11. Basically, we're operationally reporting, hey, I've given greetings operationally out. Like, I've greeted Charles by saying, hello, Charles, right? What we're going to do next is, on the configuration side, we're going to say, hey, listen, I want to tell you what greeting to use if some particular person comes to you. So you could say, hola, when Charles comes in. And that's where we're going to be doing stuff with the config store. But that's exercise 11, I think. Something like that.
I was testing it wrong.
Yep, no worries.
So what do you suggest? Do I just redo the
I laugh at everything. Ask anyone. Poor old Yeller. You're not the only one playing these games these days. Have you run into Steve Noble? Steve Noble? I don't know, but he's also playing with OpenDaylight on Pies. He's a big bearded guy, does scalability testing with OpenDaylight. Was last seen running like 2,500 switches against OpenDaylight, something ridiculous like that.
So I should just run that again, or in hope, or?
I think it's, well,
So what is it? What's happening? Is it just not starting?
no, it runs for a long time. 270,000. Oh, okay.
Huh. That's bizarre. I don't know.
Every time I've seen that, it's just a case of it's going so slow that we can't get enough things written to the disk for it to be able to pick up and use.
So it's deadlocking, basically.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I think I have a fairly quick question.
Oh, good. I may even have a quick answer.
Yeah, my Eclipse is like severely forked. It won't even show red when there are errors.
That's not good. Is this your Eclipse, or the one in the VM?
The one on the VM. And
Weird.
When it hit a period, when it tries to autocomplete, it gets like an error every time you hit a period.
So what have you tried to resolve it?
I've just like tried to get it to act as an editor and then just build from the command line.
Okay, so one of the things you might try and do. So keep in mind,
I wiped
you deleted the workspace. Okay, yeah.
I deleted the workspace and tried to pull it in from the top, but that didn't seem to help it. But I've got it almost working now. The one thing that I'm having trouble with,
Yeah.
not Eclipse, the command line, is there's an import of logging futures callback.
You have to write that yourself. It's in the instructions, but it's a terrible place. It's at the very end of that section, which it should be further up.
Okay.
So that's totally doable.
Okay.
Apologies. Yeah.
Actually, I want to ask for some general advice
Okay.
about the OpenDaylight controller architecture.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm quite new to this, but I
Sure.
just want to see something whether it's feasible and whether it's proper. Say, in theory, if like my component sits on the south side, and this is in the context of group-based policy, right?
Yep.
Suppose my component sits on the south side, but we're actually interested in seeing what the group-based policy is from the north side perspective. Is it feasible and
So you basically want to be able to see group-based policies model, so you can do something. So it's very likely, so it's possible completely. It's very likely even kosher depending. So basically, what it sounds like you're starting to describe is what I would call a renderer for group-based policy.
Correct.
Right.
If we wanted to do the rendering.
Right. So, I mean, and group-based policy is intrinsically designed so that policy comes in on the north-south side, and you have many different renderers that take that policy and talk to devices in order to make sure that policy comes to pass. So, so yes, the general thing you're trying to do is entirely proper. Doing it correctly, I mean, you potentially could do it incorrectly in a way that was improper, but the thing you're trying to do is completely proper.
But is that what is that is actually the normal? But like I would see it in what the northbound API sees.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and that's often what you do with multi-render. So like I know SSC and GPV both, they're set up so that you can have that kind of behavior. If you talk to Keith Burns, who's PTL for the G-based policy project, I'm sure he'd love to help you get into a position to write a render for it. Because what makes things like group-based policy and SSC really valuable is having many renderers. And one of the really nice things is, if you can actually render group-based policy, is Neutron can be translated into that policy. And in fact, we've actually got, I think it's the most feature-rich implementation right now of the Neutron API in OpenDaylight, in terms of translates that to policy, and then we have a renderer that can talk to OVS, but we could have a renderer that talk to your devices as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Another general question is, how can I find a quick comparison between the group-based policy from, like, from the OpenStack CAM versus the OpenDaylight CAM?
That I don't know. Keith might have a better idea. I know that like part of the problem you run into trying to do group-based policy in OpenStack is that OpenStack is fundamentally only a VM placer, so it knows less than 1% of the objects in the network. So you can't really do network-wide policy with it. You have to have a controller for that. So I mean, it might be interesting to be able to express some very local policy about VMs only, and then have that translated down to or up from the controller. But if you're really talking about doing network policy for real, you got to do it in a controller. You can't do it in a VM placer. So.
We appreciate your insight.
My pleasure. Yes. I might even be able to answer you.
I was testing number 9, and so it built. But I'm not sure if it is like, is this how it should look like, or I should see two operations here?
So there's the operational store at the top, then config store, then operations, which is the.
Yeah, I saw that it was here.
Yep.
This, and then there's config.
And then there's operations. Operations of the RPC. So go to Hello World under the operations, and just execute that the way you did before.
Yeah, this works. I tested. So.
Yep. And then. Yep. And then go back up to the operational store, drill down to the config registry, or the greeting registry. Just click on greeting registry. So one up the hierarchy. Yep, and then click send, which will get you the full listing there. Okay, and you're not getting anything back, which means that you're not getting written to your registry.
Because I should see that thing that I sent also added to my registry.
Exactly, it should show up in your registry.
So it's somehow in the code I didn't do it properly.
Yeah, my guess is like probably you just forgot to call the method that writes to the registry from your RPC.
I might not have called it properly, but I did have it there.
Also, you've got a lot of errors.
This is
that's the test. Yeah.
The other one. So it's in the implementation. Right?
Yep, it's an impl.
It was here.
Yep.
This one?
Yep, that one. So let's take a look.
This? Do you mean this?
Yep, that's the correct write. Let's see. Oh, you're not initializing the data tree. So, see in your constructor how you're not calling initialized data tree? So my guess is your writes are failing because you've not initialized data tree. So the initialized data tree has to be called in your
constructor?
Yep, in the constructor.
Before this, the DB?
It doesn't make any difference in that case. All of this .db is doing is sort of squirreling away, hey, this is the data broker I've been told about.
And then it takes
DB, the data broker.
the same one.
The same one. So try that.
Do I need to do only the API or
The only, you can rebuild just the impl, and then you can rebuild the carafe. So when you rebuild the impl, you only made changes to impl, so you can just rebuild impl. But if you want it to show up in your carafe distribution, then you have to rebuild carafe to pull those changes in. Hey, how can I help you?
So I'm not going to be able to attend the session after this one.
Good,
So,
no worries.
I was wondering how I could get access to the slides.
So the slides are listed under introduction on the wiki page, yep. Yeah, so it should, like, anything written I've got is there. Awesome, my pleasure.
Thank you. Great session, brother.
Oh, glad you liked it. Yes. That's a bad sign. Oh, I can tell you why. So you're still using the parameter name, right? So whatever it is you're passing into validate grading register needs to not match the string name. Because look at it structurally. Name is what you pass to the RPC, and then name is also what you're looking for in the registry. So if you just change name, then well, no, but the thing is you need to pass a different name to validate grading registry than you pass to the RPCs. Because if it's working and you pass the name to the RPCs, then you validate it, then you're just saying, okay, if the name you gave to the RPC was Ed Warnicke, it looks to see if it's in there. And it's like, oh, we got it, right? You're good to go.
It's a totally different value you have to make it up.
Yeah, you need to pass a totally different value to the validate than you pass to the RPC.
We did pass a different value.
Huh.
I think we did. Wait a second. I didn't get that.
Yeah, we gave a totally different value.
You still alive?
Apparently.
I'm shocked.
Is there a pool?
Yeah, there is. There's a pool. I lost.
So that's why you came to check on me. You wanted to see if you wanted to see whether you picked win the
How's it
pool.
going then? Is it okay?
It's going really well. They're up to exercise 10 out of 16.
Cool.
Hammering along, doing great.
In one of the next chapters, will you be teaching about listeners?
About what?
Listeners.
Laziness?
Listeners. Event listeners.
Oh, you mean asynchronous? Handling things asynchronously?
The thing is when you populate in a data notification. Notification.
Oh, data change listeners. Yes. So basically, after this, we do exercise 11 and 12, which are about writing to the config store so that you can customize the greetings, making hello world programmable, basically. And then after that, we look at using data change listeners to work on data change listeners for to rewrite a little bit our integration tests. Because
So if somebody changes some data in this config store or operational store, if they got the data even the listeners, they can listen to that and do some other activity.
absolutely, that's the idea. So you could respond to what's changed.
Is this supposed to break it?
Let me see.
I give the total value.
No, so keep in mind, the variable name gets passed to both the RPC and the validate greeting. So whatever you set it to, it's going to get passed to both the RPC and the validate greeting.
It shouldn't matter.
Yeah, so you just literally, if you went to a validate greeting registry and just changed it from name to, foo.
This guy, right?
Yeah, no, so where you call it in the test RPC. So you got test RPC, just replace name with, open quote, foo, close quote. Don't change the value of name. Go down where you're using it in validate greeting registry there, yes? Yep, and just quote foo, close quote.
Oh.
You see what I'm saying?
So okay, then it's gonna compare.
Right, because then it's gonna say, hey, I'm looking for, or you could pass the wrong name. It's basically saying, hey, does it break? Does it break if I go looking for it and it's not there?
Basically declare two variables.
Yeah, effectively, that's what you're doing. Evidently, Shama was saying they're sort of a pool as to whether I'll survive.
This is actually a local variable. I don't know why it will reflect here also.
Yeah, how did this guy know the variable name?
No, I think you're
You pass it.
I passed it.
The validate grading registry creates the entry
Sorry, what?
Even if irrespective of what name it has, when I call it in the IT method, if it's not present, this would create the entry. Right?
No, that's the instance identifier. All it's doing is creating the pointer to the entry.
Okay.
So it's saying, I want to look for this thing, and then has a read-only transaction that tries to read that node.
So it'll fail if it's not present.
Yeah, if it's not present, it'll fail. Present, it'll fail. Shamo said they're at least starting a pool as to whether I'll survive.
We're surviving. Go for it.
Yeah, it's going well.
I'm behind catching up though.
Awesome.
Yeah, things are building.
It's the plan.
Yeah, so good.
Well, bit by bit, and the thing is, like, these are really simple examples, but the same pattern you use for absolutely everything.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you should be able to continue even if you're not able to finish.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
Yeah. By the way, I think let me go check at the timer. I think we're on break. Oh. Okay, guys, we are on break. Don't let them eat all the cookies. We have to go get ours.